The entire Empyre X-Men 4-issue tie-in has been a blast, and the concluding 4th issue is honestly one of my favorite issues in the Dawn of X. I think it's some of Jonathan Hickman's best Marvel Universe writing, and there's loads to unpack both on the surface and in the grander tapestry of the Dawn of X. Today I'll answer, what happened after Scarlet Witch resurrected the Genoshan Mutant zombies? How big of a hypocrite is Doctor Strange? A dark theory about Beast's internal monologue, and how the Explodey Boy gag throughout this series provides surprising payoff here in the 4th and final issue. Hey, I'm Dave Busing. You're listening to Krakin Krakoa number 74, part of Comic Book Herald. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or podcast, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. Again, over on CBH, you can find links in the show notes to reading orders for all of these comics, including the Empyre event crossover, the X-Men and the Dawn of X crossovers, right? And the entire reading order for the entire Dawn of X. Spoilers for this comic will follow. Writer Jonathan Hickman, art by Jorge Molina and Lucas Werneck, inks by Adriano De Benedito and Lucas Werneck, colors by Nolan Woodard and Rachel Rosenberg, and letters by Clayton Cowles. Even though I thought it would be kind of funny if Wanda botched her spell, created 16 million Genoshan Mutant zombies, and then bailed hard, unsurprisingly, the reality is that she's horrified by what's happened and resolves to undo the damage. To quote-unquote unring this bigger bell, she turns back to Doctor Strange for help, who we saw her visit back in Empyre X-Men number 1, when she basically expressed that she was still feeling tremendous remorse for her role at the end of House of M, saying no more mutants and causing the decimation of mutant kind, which is why we've seen her labeled the Great Pretender by the mutants of Krakoa. So Wanda barters with Doctor Strange to get him to help her undo the zombies. Apparently just like resurrecting 16 million mutant zombies on an island was not enough to get him to do so. He has to get some phone number of a lady that he's lost access to help. And we learn a couple things here. One, Doctor Strange has the absolute best decanters. The snake decanters are incredible. And two, he will do it after this bartering. There's tremendous hypocrisy of Doctor Strange here throughout this issue as he condemns constantly Wanda's actions, and he's condescending and talking down to her for the way she's botched this. Little reminder for Stevie, back in 2017's post-Secret Empire Damnation crossover event, he did the exact same thing, except slightly more successfully, I guess. In the Damnation event, he resurrected the population of Las Vegas as his own penance for Secret Empire, but he also brought in, Mephisto and a bunch of demons to Las Vegas as well. So, huge hypocrite on that front. There's a brief montage of the duo, Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange, reclaiming the artifacts Wanda used for her spell. We do see Hickman showing effective humor and heart throughout this comic. Doctor Strange calls Wong a dick. He gives Norse gods light beer as a distraction. It's very funny. It's actually good humor. I think Hickman's humor can be very hit or miss. This issue worked very effectively for me. And then there's the Explodey Boy heart-to-heart, which we'll get to. So as an author, Hickman's best known for this long-term planning and science fiction, but as readers of FF know, the spin-off series coming out of his Fantastic Four run, he can also write extremely effective, more lighthearted fare. And Empyre X-Men offers an opportunity to really explore that in a way that we haven't gotten to see really any of in the pages of X-Men, and I guess we did get to see in the early stages of New Mutants. So Doc and Wanda set a 30-day countdown on the zombies. Mutants find them warring with the Kotati effectively on day 29. The Kotati, which I apparently can't get out today, they are the Empyre villains. They are the plant race that is trying to exterminate all human life. Not super important unless you're reading Empyre, but for the purposes of X-Men, hey, they're there. They're hanging out, right? So this explains why it appears that Doctor Strange and Wanda have bailed on the zombie island throughout this series, because they actually are keeping it a secret. They're literally just hoping nobody shows up on Genosha, this decimated island, for 30 days. Again, a warning probably wouldn't have been the worst thing. Let's just say Wanda communicates what she did to Krakoa, right? Obviously, they're mad, right? She says, hey, I tried to bring all these mutants back. I made them zombies. They're like, Wanda, what is wrong with you? But let's just say somebody, I don't know, her ex-dad, Magneto, probably wants to talk to her. They have a relationship, could tell her about resurrection protocols, or at least say hey, you can stop worrying about that. We have something to take care of it. She can stop fussing with this then, right? She can stop feeling this eternal penance, which, again, maybe Krakoa doesn't necessarily want to let her off the hook. Ileana goes full Darkchild, and she tries to make everyone her demon slave, makes a big pass at Nightcrawler, and then returns to normal as the staff expires, as the countdown finally gets to the 30-day time limit, and becomes, Ileana Rasputin in control, essentially, that we know. So after exploring what it means for Ileana to go full Darkchild, where this demon personality really takes over, that's pretty clearly not a point. It's not a big point of this story, other than to confirm that's still very much a part of her, and that, those demonic instincts, that demonic part of her persona, it's there, and when it comes over, she might try and turn on all of the X-Men yet again. So that is something that certainly could come up in the future. After 2 issues of all-out zombie versus Plants versus X-Men action, that's kind of all background noise, this issue, and that's actually a big reason why I love it. It doesn't need to be the focus again this issue, and it works because there's so much else going on. I will also call out the psychics that came to battle in Empyre vs. X-Men, really just kind of background noise as well. Mr. Sinister and Exodus, they're just there. Quentin Quire gets a few lines last issue. And Shadow King, again, despite the appearance in issue number 2, nowhere to be found. So I have to think that was a mistake. Or again, my favorite theory that I'm pitching is Shadow King shows up at totally random moments, and it makes us all think we're going insane. Beast has a conversation in his own head, internal theory or internal thinking, and this ties into my theory that, and what a lot of people have been pitching is, out of the pages of X-Force, we know Beast, Hank McCoy, is deeply compromised, deeply ethically compromised. He's making huge mistakes. He has done a genocide at this point, right? It is a big crime. And the theory here is that Dark Beast is somehow, maybe that is Dark Beast, maybe he's taking over. This internal monologue between a Dr. McCoy and Henry actually does feel like it ties into potentially the Dark Beast theory. Now, there's a pretty good chance, again, Occam's razor theory, that it's just the simplest explanation is just he's having fun with his internal monologue. Very possible. But I quite like the idea that this is actually Beast talking to a Dark Beast persona that is inhabiting the same body. Back in Matthew Rosenberg written Uncanny X-Men run, which comes in that the last thing we've seen of X-Men before the 6-month time gap leading up to House of X and Powers of 10, Dark Beast plays a major role throughout that run. He's around, again, he's a cast-off from the Age of Apocalypse. He's a beast that just, he's an evil beast, right? It's right in the name. It's easy. But he is seemingly and quite gruesomely murdered. I think by magic, actually. I think by Ileana. Towards the end of that run, the idea, though, again, this is X-Men, this is comics, we have resurrection protocols, we have all sorts of ways that people don't actually die in comics. Dark Beast inhabiting the same body as Beast and them having this back and forth would be an interesting development. I think importantly here, Beast actually, he does steal horde culture technology to figure out how horde culture, the old ladies who have this really effective tech and sort of plant-based interest, how they're hacking Krakoan gates. So that's a big development for Krakoan security finally as well. So again, rather than focus on action, we get the Explodey Boy heart-to-heart. So the real living Explodey Boy shows up to meet his zombie counterpart on the Warring Island. It's really excellent. They talk about what it's like to be alive, how Explodey Boy's life is going, his first kiss, right? It's a really nice sort of heart-to-heart. Again, trying to imagine what it would be like talking to your zombie mutant self who is going to expire shortly when they actually, when these zombies have to go away. And X-Men fans have been wondering if none of the Genoshan mutants had already been resurrected, or if they had, and that's a part of why Wanda's spell went wrong, which isn't, super confirmed here, but it's still very possible that that's an explanation. And here we get confirmation of the living Explodey Boy telling us that, yes, some of the Genoshan mutants have been resurrected. It would be really weird if Krakoa was not prioritizing. I know there's this resurrection queue we've seen in other issues like X Factor where, the 5 only have so much capacity to resurrect mutants. But again, Genosha being this huge, horrible event in mutant history, it makes sense that some of them absolutely would have been resurrected as well. So I think the big takeaways for me are what is actually the message of Wanda Maximoff here? What is the story that Jonathan Hickman is interested in telling? I love that we get Scarlet Witch integrated into this crossover. It makes the crossover so much more interesting. But I think the big question is, should Wanda be allowed to grow past the events of House of M and Decimation? I think obviously Hickman hasn't really played with the character much before, even in his Marvel Universe writing that goes from like 2008 to 2016. And the way it's framed here throughout this issue is Wanda is trying to atone for the decimation. You know, she's been labeled the Great Pretender by Krakoa, and there's a clear indication, every indication at the end of this issue is she won't move on, right? She won't kind of keep on living and move past this great shame, this great trauma that she did. She can't ever really move past the fact that this is a thing that she did. She decimated mutant kind regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the state of her mental health at the time in House of M, when she had, you know, all these things conspiring. Avengers disassembled into House of M. It's a really rough time for Wanda Maximoff, and she lashes out as a result. I think we can safely assume, too, like, resurrection is still a complete secret from Wanda, from Doctor Strange, and I'm just going to extend that to the Avengers, right? Because the Avengers knew, why wouldn't they tell Wanda? She's bouncing around with them in an Empire tie-in. Although that hero network is complicated when you consider now Franklin Richards' presence on Krakoa, and obviously his communications with family in the Fantastic Four. It seems pretty unlikely to me that, like, at Fantastic Four dinner, family time, Franklin would never let slip the resurrection protocols. I don't know. But it seems like, you know, if it gets out to the Fantastic Four, now all of a sudden we got this sort of Marvel Universe hero network connecting on those deeds. But it would seem kinder for someone to just tell Wanda about resurrection rather than putting her in this endless cycle of trying to atone, again, which is something she has dealt with in other comics. There's a really good piece, I think, on Sci-Fi. It was written by Sarah Sentry, and I'll try to include a link if I remember here in the show notes, about Wanda and her sort of endless path towards some sort of redemption. It's a redemption arc that never gets to no peace. And I do think at some point here, if Hickman's plan is just to force Wanda into this sort of torment to keep her spinning her wheels on trying to atone, I'm not saying she shouldn't be like very actively trying to help mutant kind for what she has done, right? Let's not give her a pass for decimation necessarily. But clearly she's trying, and she doesn't have this crucial information, and she's making things worse as a result of it. I'm also wondering with Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, like, how sure are we that she isn't a mutant? I've done a Krakin Krakoa on this. It was one of the earliest Krakin Krakoas I did, talking about her lineage and her parentage. And it's a mess, right? It's a complicated mess. But the most recent pieces of information we have is like in 2015's Uncanny Avengers series. The High Evolutionary told Wanda and Pietro, her twin brother, Quicksilver, that they are not mutants, okay? So speaking of bells you could unring, to extend the metaphor used in this comic, I actually think Wanda's story becomes way more interesting if she's a mutant who has inflicted these damages on her people. How does Krakoa manage that, right? So if you unring the bell of she's not a mutant because the High Evolutionary told us, the most trustworthy dude in all of Marvel, right? And you actually say, actually, let's re-retcon all of that. No, you are in fact a mutant, whether you're Magneto's kids or not, I don't know. But now if she's a part of Krakoa, to me, that's very, very interesting. Do they just cast her into a pit like Sabretooth for what she's done? Do they try and work with her? Is there a path to redemption extended to her now that actually exists? Because again, like the thing she's trying to do is she's trying to undo Genosha, as a result of decimation. When it seems like actually the thing that would be more effective would be if she undid the decimation, right? Like as far as she knows, some of those mutants still don't have powers. That actually seems like it would have been a more direct way of helping or measure of atonement, which she might now try and do. I think my takeaway from that ending scene is she's reading a spell book trying to think of the next thing to do, right? Because the Genosha resurrection didn't work. Because, hey, guess what? Krakoa already has resurrection protocols, and they don't need it. So I'm really interested to see where Wanda's going to go from here, what the story of the Scarlet Witch is going to be. I'm not totally... Like, Hickman doesn't seem, as a storyteller, certainly not in the early going, interested in actually giving her some redemption. Again, she's the boogeyman of Krakoa. We see Exodus telling kids on Krakoa, like she is the great pretender, she is the great villain. Even more so than Cassandra Nova, who we never see talked about. So it's interesting. And again, this is a very fun issue. I'm sad to see Empyre X-Men end with 4 issues. Honestly, this tie-in crossover was awesome. The first and fourth issues, written by Hickman, obviously providing all of the Scarlet Witch updates as well. So I dug these. I'm gonna have more Krakin Krakoas today. It's a huge, exciting, awesome day of X-Men comics today. Comics released on August 19th. If you like Comic Book Herald, you can find more ways to support the site on patreon.com/comicbookherald, as well as some cool benefits. I've got the mysterious benefactors listed up here who are supporting the site at the $10 a month level, which is extremely generous and awesome. So thanks so much, everybody there. You can find more of my work on comicbookherald.com. Again, I'm Dave. Coming up, I think, in the next episode of Krakin Krakoa, I'm going to cover the issue of Cable. I'm going to try to cover all 4 X-Men comics that came out today. Definitely Cable and Excalibur, and then we'll see what I have to say about the remainder. And I do want to tease here, if you're making it all the way to the end, my weekend coverage of Krakin Krakoa. I'm asking some bigger questions. This last weekend, I asked, did Hickman actually retcon Mr. Sinister? That video is seemingly connecting with a lot of people, a lot of interesting thoughts there. Check that out if you haven't already. And this upcoming weekend, I will announce I'm going to be posting a video, I've already got it done, on a huge Ten of Swords theory. I believe that I have solved, with much help, the classified sword bearer. So Marvel's been running these, who are the sword bearers of Morocco coming up in the Ten of Swords event. There's a classified one. I've got the answer, and I think it's actually very interesting the ways it ties into X-Men history. So get ready for that. That's coming this weekend. But otherwise today, a bunch of reviews. I'm Dave. Find my stuff at Comic Book Herald. Thanks everybody for listening. I want to hear your comments, thoughts, theories, questions, things you want to see covered in the comments. Hit me up with them. And if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. It's greatly appreciated and helps me reach more people. So thanks everybody for listening, and enjoy the comics.